What's going on, everybody? You're listening to the very first episode of the Tough Mulligans podcast. My name is Nil.
And I'm Greenie.
And today we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite topic. We're going to be talking about some Stax. So, what is Stax? Why is Stax struggling? And is there a future for it in cEDH? So, yeah, let's hop right into that.
So, first of all, what is Stax?
Stax is the slow, quote-unquote, archetype in cEDH. It is designed to slow your opponents down rather than just turbo towards the win. Of the four big archetypes, those being turbo, mid-range, control, and Stax. Stax is currently the one in the worst place in the current meta. And I feel like some discussion should really be had about why exactly it's in such a bad place. So.
Just for clarification, one little nitpick. Some Stax players call it making the game more fair, not slowing your opponents down. Hey, I'm just saying, some of my effects are symmetrical.
That's true.
Just saying.
That's true. Stax, to me, is a deceptively adaptive archetype. And people play it like it's proactive, and I feel like that's a problem. My main issue with Stax in the current meta is that Stax is actually bad because people don't know how to play it properly.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would think that not only do people not know how to play it and think it's proactive, I think that there's actually a third option between proactive and reactive. And I think that is a mix of both. Defensive, almost. Proactive kind of implies that you are going out of your way to stop your opponents. Reactive implies that you are stopping the blow as it's being thrown at you. And I think that if we sit somewhere in the middle, I think that's where Stax truly thrives. But you are right, it's very, very adaptive. I think that a lot of people play it one way or the other, or they think that Stax is only going to round 30 and then drawing the game out, and then nobody wins, and wonderful, you have another win conless Stax deck that nobody wants to play with, and then you lose all your friends.
Yeah. Like, that's one thing that a lot of newer Stax players have in their head, is that it has on top of having such a high skill floor, there very much is a wrong way to play Stax. And
I agree.
I feel like that's the biggest contributor to why Stax is currently struggling. Because I personally feel like Stax, if played correctly, could actually be part of the solution to the current mid-range cesspool that we exist in.
You can say hell. It's okay. Hell is not a bad word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the big problems is, you're right, people don't really know how to play Stax.
Yeah. And that's not to insult people or anything, but...
Well, what I'm saying is, hey, I play Noda almost exclusively, and sometimes I'll, dip into Simic. If you threw me a Najeela or a Sisay or a Blue Farm deck, and believe me, I know because this has happened, if you were to sit down with a Sisay deck and say, play the deck, I might be able to get through a line, partway, maybe. I don't know how to play it. And if you don't know how to play something, how are you supposed to win with it? How are you supposed to play it effectively if you don't know how to play it at all?
Yeah.
We're not calling people stupid when we say people don't know how to play Stax. We're saying there's not a lot of resources to teach people how to play Stax effectively.
Yeah, Stax has an incredibly high skill floor. To play it in an effective manner, it already takes an excess amount of time that most new players they don't understand that they have to give to Stax to make it perform.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's where it sits personally, where most of the blame sits. Now, granted, mid-range has gotten a lot of new cards lately, and man, they are eating well at the moment.
Well, mid-range is the favorite child. They always get the new toys.
Yeah.
The last thing Stax has gotten is what, High Noon?
Well, it's got some new stuff, but we'll get into that.
We'll get into that.
So, what, in your opinion, is the wrong way to play Stax?
Oh boy. Do I have not only an answer for this, I have examples and experience. So how long you got? Nah, I'm just kidding. So, I think that the wrong way to play Stax is to kind of play it willy-nilly. And what I mean by that is, say I'm playing, I don't know, Nagila. Not Nagila, that's not a Stax deck. It can be. If I'm playing Slicer, right? And I have a Magda deck against me, and that Magda deck is about to go off, and I lay down a Blood Moon, which says everything is a red mountain, or non-basic lands are a red mountain. Well, Magda's a mono-red deck. It doesn't care about other colors than red. So it might slow it down a little bit if it's got the fancy lands, but it's not going to slow it down significantly.
Yeah.
Playing stacks that don't impact your opponents because you don't know how your opponent's decks work. Again, going back to people don't know how to play stacks because it's so difficult, you have to have so much knowledge. Playing the wrong stacks pieces is, well, the wrong way to play stacks. But I think you have a little bit of insight about how to define, quote-unquote, the wrong stacks piece, don't you?
I do. The wrong stacks piece is not necessarily putting a stacks piece into your deck and it not performing. Every stacks piece has its place and its time. Playing the wrong stacks piece, quote unquote, is all about, or playing the right stacks piece, I should say, quote unquote, is minimizing those situations where you don't have access to a stacks piece that's actually going to help in this scenario. So what you kind of want to be looking at when you're building your stacks deck is to look at effects that are either one-sided. One-sided stacks effects already get like a point up, and you also want to be looking at what is actually good in the current meta. I feel like if you are going to effectively play stacks, more so than any other archetype, you actually need to understand what the meta is going to look like.
People will crucify me for this one, but there is such thing as a local meta.
Yeah.
In my local meta, Gitrog and Yisan and green decks are actually pretty heavy. For some reason. I don't know why.
Which is it's unusual. It's very unusual.
It is really unusual. I think Utah is definitely a paragon of just weird cEDH players. But because of that, I've actually been considering throwing Zozu the Punisher in. It is a symmetrical stacks effect. However, it's not a stacks effect, it's a damage effect. However, it says when a land comes into play, it does 2 damage to the land's controller. So your fetch land now costs 5 life to play. Or if you have a land that hits the battlefield from, say, Animar or Gitrog or something like that, you're going to be paying for it deeply.
Yeah.
So I think that in any other meta, Zozu, people would look at you and go, I thought you were playing cEDH and not casual. But in my meta, Zozu actually has a lot of potential to just be an absolute fire hose for like 10 different decks.
Yeah. Like, you have to build towards your meta in stacks. You can't just play it out and expect it to work.
Absolutely.
Like, for instance, the poster child for stacks in cEDH is Rule of Law. And don't get me wrong, Rule of Law is fantastic. It is popular for a reason, and it is fantastic bottom to top, even in its worst cases. But it's not all there is. There's a lot of different kinds of stacks that you can play, and a lot of the times a Rule of Law is the last thing that you need.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I can't count the number of times where I've had Archon of America or Deafening Silence, or Ameria, or Deafening Silence, or Aetherstorm Canonist, or one of the Rule of Laws that I play, right? One of the like 6, and somebody says you need to get rid of your Rule of Law right now, or I don't know. This player wins the game. I don't name a player, right? Like Sisse wins the game.
Right.
And I go, I can't do anything. And because of that Rule of Law, not only did I hand the game to somebody else, I just, I hucked it to them. So you have to know, you definitely are right. There are more stacks pieces than just Rule of Law.
Yeah,
What's your favorite Stax piece, just kind of in the moment. What's the first Stax piece that comes to mind that isn't Rule of Law?
Gotta be Dranith, right?
Dranith is a very popular one, and I think it's for good reason. Most cEDH decks nowadays, with the exception of a couple, because of course there's always going to be exceptions, lots of them do revolve around their commander.
Yeah. Or
honestly,
or even just casting from the graveyard. Breach, that eats up Breach. You can't win. You can't win through that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite quote-unquote Stax piece, I don't know if you call it a Stax piece as much as a counter piece. It has a Stax effect, kind of, called Order of the Sacred Torch. It's actually a little bit of an older card.
Yeah. I know the one.
Yeah, counter target black spell. That hoses so many different decks. Like Thoracle, what's the most common piece you play with Thoracle?
Yeah, that's Demcon, Tainted Pact.
Yeah.
That's
what are you? Both of those are black.
That eats up your Nas, that eats up your Praetor's Grasps, all those kind of staples.
And notably, for Winota, it eats up Orcish Bowmasters.
It does eat up Orcish Bowmasters.
It is so unbelievably good. It just looks at your spell. It looks at any deck that's running black and just hits the big red X button. It just says, no, you can't play. I win now. It's so good.
Now, for the record, I don't think it's a good card, but it is a very strong effect. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's not a good card. It's a 2/2. It's a 3-drop 2/2, and you have to tap it. It's not amazing, but I'm Winota. I have my ways.
Yeah. All that to say that there's a lot more out there than new Stax players think they are. I think that the number one thing that Stax players, especially new ones, need to get into their head if they want to succeed with Stax is they have to realize that going to time is not the same as winning the game.
Okay, here's a question for you.
Yes.
When it comes to Stax decks, what do you think the main goal should be? We're going to say very standard, like a mono white Heliod deck, or even an Azorius Heliod deck, just something kind of Staxy with card draw. What do you think is going to be better? Going to time or winning? What should be the main goal?
Winning should always be the goal.
Interesting.
Winning should just about always be the goal. The option to go to time should never be a thought in your head until that timer hits 10 minutes, in my opinion.
See, and I have actually the opposite opinion. I think that the main goal should be not necessarily going to time, but the main goal should be don't lose. Because I can't tell you how many times I've been training new players or kind of coaching new players, and they have said, oh, but if I just can get to my next turn, then I win the game. And I go, I don't care if you win the game on your next turn. That guy has a Necropotence on field. He's about to win the game on your upkeep. So I think the main goal should always be just beat other people down and make sure they don't lose. And that kind of creates a crab in the bucket effect, yes. But I think the main goal should always be don't lose. Second goal should always be win.
To be fair, you do have Winota bias on that.
That is true. In literally any other deck, and I've played like Keurig and things, in literally any other deck, you are super, super right. Mm-hmm. And I do have Boros Brain Rot. I'll fully admit it.
Yeah. Yeah, because you got to understand, like, at the end of the day, Stax players, losing, winning, and not losing are three completely different things.
Main goal should always be don't lose. Second goal should always be win.
Yes. I can get down with that.
Yeah, but you are right that winning should come before going to draw.
Yes. Yeah, actively choosing to go to draw should be the last thing on your mind, and that should only happen when time is of the essence. You're at the end of the clock, in my opinion.
So, if going to time is kind of considered like the worst option, so you've just presented three things. You've presented winning, not losing, and going to time. And I think that's actually very similar to kind of the three effects that Stax can have that we kind of mentioned and touched on earlier of defense, offense, and the mid game.
Yeah, I'm with on that for sure.
So what I think that generally means is kind of like we mentioned earlier, reactive versus proactive Stax. A defensive Stax deck would be, hey, if I see Keurig, you know that I'm laying down the rule of law. I know there's more to it than rule of law, but I'm laying down that rule of law. I'm laying down that Dranith. An offensive Stax piece would be... Oh, give me a good example of an offensive Stax piece.
Throw out a Thalia effect for sure.
Yeah, okay, tax effect.
A Thorn of Amethyst, 100%.
Thorn of Amethyst, besides being a beautiful card in the art, is just a beautiful card. You ever heard the sound of a Thorn of Amethyst hitting the table?
I've actually not.
It sounds a lot like a whole bunch of groaning and sometimes a couple of swears.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Alright, and then a mid-game Stax piece is going to be something that kind of draws the game to a middle, but I would honestly say that a mid-game Stax piece also stops mid-range decks. So one of my favorite Stax piece that every deck that plays white should play, I don't care who you are, that can play it, of course not every deck can afford to play it, is Spirit of the Labyrinth, which says, card draw, you draw one card a turn. That screws over Bowmasters, that screws over One Ring. Fun fact, it actually screws over the Gitrog monster too. Yeah. Because the Gitrog monster has to replace with a dredge effect.
Yeah, and if there's the draw is mandatory. Yep.
Yeah, if there's no draw to replace, then you just don't dredge at all.
I do believe that Spirit is kind of underplayed. The reason why it's underplayed 100% is Bowmasters. And because of how common and reusable Bowmasters is, it's really like a lot of players struggle to internalize being willing to play X1s. And that's not to say that Spirit of the Labyrinth is the one that's worth it.
Yeah, but, I'm just giving an example because, again, Boros Brain Rot. Yeah, I'm sure there's other effects.
That's not to say that Spirit of the Labyrinth is the one that's worth it, but some effects are powerful enough that you're willing to just throw it into a Bowmasters. Stopping card draw is a big deal in this current meta because the way that Stax decks lose is that they successfully slow people down, and then the mid-range players just get to sit there and draw cards.
You need pieces that stop other people.
Yeah. You gotta punch. I guess punch above your weight class is how I would describe it. You're shooting at the things that are designed to beat you.
Everyone loves to root for a nuisance, am I right?
Yeah.
If somebody's not going to win the game, chances are, and this kind of bleeds into our next topic, if somebody's not going to win the game because you have 17 different Stax pieces on the board that just say no, chances are you can probably politic them into sticking around to stopping the other people from winning too.
Yeah.
And I think that does bleed into a very important topic, politicking in Stax.
Yeah.
And I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
There does come a point where if you're playing hard stacks, which we'll get into that topic later, but if you're playing hard stacks, there does come a point where you have been successful in playing hard stacks, in which players can no longer win. And at that point, you gain this weird amount of leverage where, like, their best option is to go to time. So by not necessarily presenting options to them, but presenting threats to them, you coerce them into getting your way.
I remember. Go ahead.
Yeah. I feel like that's a big part of late game politicking. Offensive politicking in Stax. As far as defensive politicking goes, I think being willing to burn your answers and your material to get a Stax piece off the board when it needs to be off the board is paramount to playing Stax properly. Like you have to be willing to realize that if you're going to play adaptive Stax, which is where I personally believe you should be, if you're going to play adaptive Stax, you have to realize that there are some points in the game where Stax is not necessary.
One of my favorite Stax pieces that we'll get to later is Boromir, specifically for that reason. He's such a powerful politicking piece. Boromir, I know nobody ever reads the second line. First line reads, if an opponent casts a spell and no mana is spent to cast it, counter the spell. second line says you can actually sacrifice Boromir. Creatures you control get indestructible, ring tempts you. That's fine. The big part is that you can sacrifice him. So if somebody says, hey, I have a Pact of Negation in hand and this guy's about to win, but I can't play it because you have Boromir, you can look him in the eye and you can say, I'm going to pop Boromir, you're going to counter this spell, and if you don't, you're going to die.
Yeah.
It's so amazing to just be able to turn your Stax piece on, turn your Stax piece off, and also make deals with other players. And I'm sure that'll be a future episode, is deal making and the ethics of breaking deals and things like that. But a good Stax piece does have a lot of politicking value, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. To expand on that just a little bit, there absolutely is a difference between, like, I don't know how to describe what I'm saying. There's a difference between coercion and, like, deal making, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There comes a point where I know what I'm talking about. There's a difference between playing the Stax deck and playing the Table Police.
Mm-hmm.
The difference being one of them costs you resources and the other one wins by politics.
Yeah.
It preserves those it preserves those resources because you were able to properly politic your way into keeping those resources.
Oh yeah. One of the reasons why I attribute having made top 4 twice in not bronze tournaments with Winota, a Stax deck, is because of my ability to politic, right? Like, on my local scene, I'm kind of notorious for getting a little bit aggressive, not like, I'm gonna kill you in real life, fight me in real life, not that kind of aggressive, but maybe dropping a cuss word over here and there, maybe sticking to a plan a little bit differently than how you expected. I do keep my deals though, and one of the reasons I'm able to win is because I politic so effectively. Yeah. Politics is 50% of Winota specifically's game plan. It may not be 50% of, say, Slicer's game plan, where the whole goal is to lock you out, but in softer Stax decks, and we'll talk about locks and temporary stacks and things like that. But one of the 50%, right? You have to be really good at politicking, otherwise you're just sitting there turning off the table, and then you have 3 other players on your back going, whoa, that's an Aven Mind Sensor. We don't like that. We all have fetches on board. We need to fix that. And then suddenly you're target number 1. But if you can turn around and you can say, yeah, I have an Aven Mind Sensor, but that's a Sisay player in the corner. You don't want to kill me, and you don't want to get rid of my Aven Mind Sensor, because you don't know if Sisay's going to pop off. You have to be very tricky with your words.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, politicking is a huge thing in Stax, and there's a line between politicking and yapping, and I feel like a lot of Stax players go over the yap line pretty often, and that eats them up a whole lot.
Super side note. According to Wizards official rules, the difference between yapping and politicking is this. Politicking is, hey, do you want to make a deal with me? Hey, do you want to make a deal with me? And then the second they say no, you have to drop it. Yeah, otherwise, you can go for yapping. There's just side note, that's the line, is if they say no.
Yeah, there is actually recently there was a new rule that came out that basically said at the request of the active player, that's the person who's acting the turn it is, at the request of them, all yap just stops. You get to that does
not mean that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a very important difference. If somebody puts a Thassa's Oracle on the stack, and you guys take 15 minutes to say, well, I have this, but you have this, but we have to combine it this way, that's not yapping. That's politicking, and that's game planning. If somebody says no, and then they continue to yap, that's when active player can call. Just super side note, that's the difference.
Yeah. I feel like that'll be a great thing for cEDH, being able to stop excessive yap. But
oh boy, I am in trouble. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I love yap.
I yap. I can't even lie. I yap way too much as it is. So.
But yeah, so politicking is great, yapping is not. But besides all of that, do you think it's important, more important, I should say, to listen or to present ideas when you are staxing people? Do you think it's more important to be open to discussion, or do you think it's more important to begin discussion?
That honestly depends to me. If you are playing a harder Stax deck, you will often find yourself as the quote-unquote punching bag of the table.
Oh, yeah.
So it benefits you more to contribute to solutions rather than to present solutions. Whereas when you're playing softer stacks, you are slightly more aggressive in your game plan. You are causing the problems, so it benefits you more to present solutions than to contribute to solutions.
One of my phrases that I grew up with was never point a finger at someone because there's 3 pointing back at you, right? If you point your finger.
Right.
My response to that is, hey, it's a 4-player game. There's already 3 people pointing at me. I might as well point somewhere else.
Ain't it? Yeah, you do need to be open to discussion, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially when you are newer and somebody drops a Teshar deck and you're like, I don't know how this works. And somebody else says, I know how this works. Let me help you so we don't lose here. You need to listen to them.
Yeah.
But you also have to know when you're getting kind of scammed.
Oh, yeah.
Which is hard.
There is a certain level of trust that comes with discussion and politicking. There's a certain amount of trust. But I mean, sometimes you just gotta have it, man. You gotta have it. In every deck ever built, there is a board state in which it cannot function alone.
Mm-hmm.
And be it as it is that as the Stax deck, it's kind of your job to create those problematic board states. You still have to kind of play with them. You know, you have to understand that being open to discussion, realizing that your cards in hand almost just as much belong to your opponents playing Stax as they do to you.
There was a game where I played, right?
Yeah.
And this was kind of a fun little experiment that I did with a couple of people where none of us did politics, none of us talked at all. We named the card we played, or we showed it to other people. We didn't speak a word. We'd say, pass the turn, upkeep, on your upkeep, things like that, in response. And there was no politicking. And someone somehow managed to lock the board, but because there was literally no discussion that we were allowed to have for the sake of the experiment, we lost. We lost super, super hard.
Mm-hmm.
Damn short guy. But you are absolutely right. You need to discuss with other people, whether you're playing with Stax or whether you're playing against Stax. I think more people just need to learn how to talk with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being willing to talk and not yap is a big it's a big thing that'll make you not only just better in general at Commander, it'll make you a whole lot better at playing Stax, honestly.
It'll also make you generally a happier person. Talking to other people, making friends. But that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
So, moving on from politicking, what else would you like to talk about here?
I think the importance of picking your moments is the next thing that we should go over.
Okay.
Yeah. When it comes to playing Stax, timing is literally everything.
I mean, Adranith Magistrate into 3 Najeela decks isn't going to be nearly as effective turn 7. Which, I don't know, if you're playing against 3 Najeela decks, I don't know how you made it to turn 7, but, like, congratulations. Then it is turn 1. Yeah. It's not going to be as effective.
Yeah.
Because chances are, they're already going to have their commanders out.
Yeah. When it comes to timing, you've got to know the table that you're playing against. You have to know the order you need to deploy your stuff in. You have to know everything that there is to know about how your game plan is going to advance regardless of your opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't know, you are going to sit there and get ran over because you played the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite... Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You were going to say something interesting.
Yeah,
I was going to make a joke.
Yeah, one of my favorite new spells that actually just came out is the Vexing Bauble.
Oh yeah.
I love Vexing Bauble in this exact concept. For those of you who don't know, it's a Boromir effect. If your opponent spends 0 mana on something, they counters it. And you can pay 1 and tap it to sack it and draw a card, but it's a 1 mana rock. And I think that that's just fantastic because it allows you to time so much better. Because if you drop a bauble on 1, nobody gets mana rocks except for you. If you drop a bauble on 5, nobody gets free counter magic for your win attempts. But if you do have it on board, you can easily turn it off so that free counter magic can stop someone else.
I do think, however, that we're talking about the early Stax pieces. You want your Dranith, you want your Charismatic Conqueror, you want all of these big important pieces really early on. But I think some pieces that work later in the game, early, but also they work a lot later, is Thalia. Thalia effects, Thorn of Amethyst, Vryn Wingmare, Thalia Garden of Thraben. These effects stop things that kind of screw everyone else over. They can stop a 9-drop overloaded Psych Rift.
Yeah.
So they can full on just stop win cons, especially if you have other stacks. They can just stop the game.
Yeah, there is nothing quite like... There's nothing quite like casting a Thalia in a creature deck in this format. There's nothing quite like it.
Ugh, I love it. It's my favorite thing. It's why I run like 7 Thalia effects. Not actually. I don't know if there's even 7 in the game.
Yeah.
But either way, if it does have a different effect on the game if you play it at different points.
Yeah.
If you play it early in the game, nobody gets their mana rocks on time. If you play it late in the game, then everyone gets their mana rocks so they can stop the guy who's just attempted to cast a Cyclonic Rift and they know something's about to go off.
Right.
Or if you cast a Thalia and somebody attempts to remove it, that kind of dings off to other players. And again, this goes back to politics. You can let other people know, hey, if this guy is getting rid of Thalia, it's for a reason. He either has just enough mana to do what he wants, or they want to do something really expensive.
Yeah. It's a big part of it, realizing that your each and every one of your Stax effects are actually secretly 2 Stax effects.
Oh yeah.
Every card represents 2 different Stax effects depending on when you play it in the game.
And things like Sanctum Prelate, which is kind of like Talion, but I would argue worse.
I would argue significantly worse. It is preventative, but you get nothing out of it.
Yeah, you get nothing out of it. It is symmetrical, unfortunately. I would argue that has a lot of different effects based on when you play it, because you can play it on 0, which you cannot do with Talion, fun fact. But you can play it on 0, you can play it on 2, you can play it on 3, you can play it on 1, you can do it on anything you want. So that has as many numbers as there are. I would say actually probably 4 different effects, because there are very few spells in cEDH that go higher than 4.
Yeah.
But as long as there's 4 or 5 effects that you can stick on one card, which you can do with things like Sanctum Prelate, you have that many options in a Stax deck. You just have to know when to play them, how to play them, and who to play them against.
Yeah. Once again, timing is everything. Yeah. There does come a point where you've locked the board down enough, your opponents are doing nothing, and that is when you need to quote-unquote turn the corner.
This is my favorite part.
Yeah, turning the corner is a big thing that hard Stax decks really struggle to do.
Mm-hmm.
And why I think softer Stax decks or hybrid Stax decks function so much better than hard Stax decks, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because when your opponents can't do anything, there is literally, in any format, in any meta, in anything else, the best time for you to play your cards are when your opponents are doing nothing.
Oh, yeah.
When they can't do anything, and you can do something, you're winning the game. So this is where a lot of harder Stax decks like to sit back and just allow time to run out when they should be turning the corner and aiming for that win that only they can now get, in my opinion.
Even if you have something as simple as a quote-unquote lock with Hushbringer and Magus of the Moon, which says no ETBs and then everything's a mountain, so your dockside doesn't do anything, it is at that point when you should be laying down your insane combos, because what are people gonna do? Like, they might force of will you, but at that point...
They're burning resources that they barely have.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Combat...
So I think that...
Yeah.
I think that's where decks like Winota. I know Winota sucks. Leave it in the comments. Tell me how much you hate Winota. I know Winota sucks, but I think that's where decks like Winota thrive. Shorkai also is really good at this, where they're able to just kind of say no to their opponents, and then they just play through their own game plan. Winota doesn't care about casting anything. Shorkai just does whatever it wants. It's so fun to be able to play Stax and do it effectively and be able to turn that corner after you've told everybody else no.
Yeah. I feel like that's the difference between hard Stax decks and softer ones, really.
Yeah.
It's just that hard Stax decks are advancing towards the lock, and soft Stax decks are advancing towards the win.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like
actually
yeah,
don't run any locks.
You don't run any locks anymore?
Let me look through my list real quick. I'm just going through my menu. I'll drop it in the description if you guys want. It's not updated. I don't run any locks anymore. I used to have one, and I no longer run that lock. And the lock was a Hushbringer effect. It was Doorkeeper Thrall plus Magus, but I don't run it anymore. So I don't run any locks. I'd rather just beat people to death. So
and for the record, that one's a very soft lock for what it's worth.
Yeah, that is a super soft lock. People can easily get through that one.
Yeah.
Run a single basic. Hey, Blue Farm players, run your basic lands.
I don't know about all that, but I think they should play at least one.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just because I build mana bases like a coward. So
yeah.
You get hurt by back to basics one too many times, and you never get punished by it again.
Oh, my first deck ran back to basics. My second deck was Winota.
Yeah.
I love me back to basics effects. Blood Moon, back to basics. Give me all of them. I'm thinking on running Winter Moon.
Winter Moon. That one.
That's the new.
I don't know about the new Winter Moon.
Like, that's what I said. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. I don't know about it. It reads reasonably to me.
Very reasonable. It's not a lock. And I think I would run it in my deck where all of my creatures are like 2 mana or less, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I think that I want to talk a little bit more about hard locks.
Yeah. The thing about hard locks is that if you want to succeed with stacks and not just like go to time every time, if you want to succeed with stacks, you have to go in with the understanding that hard locks are not everything.
Oh,
there needs to be a goal that isn't just not losing, in my opinion.
I mean, and there's that, and there's also, like, don't get me wrong, I love me some red. Slicer is a meme for a reason. It locks out the board, and then it does nothing. Yeah. If you can't win through your own locks, and newsflash, a lock generally means you can't win unless you're playing like Dahada. It's just rough.
Yeah.
I don't like locks.
Yeah. Now I don't mind soft locks. Don't get me wrong. If you can assemble a soft lock that you can play through consistently, and your opponents struggle to, even though they eventually may be able to, I feel like that's a fantastic place to be. That's a completely fine goal to set for your game plan.
Well, I mean, a soft lock, is that even a lock at that point? Because that's just heavy stacks. And I think there is a line that is blurred between locks and just heavy stacks. But talk about that.
I think the line is hard locks are completely preventative, whereas soft locks are not by definition preventative at all, but they press down on you so hard that you just can't function. It's like when you, like, say for instance your plan was, okay, he has a rule of law, he has a, I know Ario's banned, but he has a rule of law, he has an Ario, that's a hard lock. You cast one spell a turn, it gets countered, and then you can't cast another spell. A softer lock would be like we just spoke about, the Torpor Orb effect and Blood Moon. For those of you who don't know, one of the reasons why people stopped playing Blood Moon it's not even recently, it's been an ongoing development for a while, but the reason people have stopped playing Blood Moon, which you shouldn't, Blood Moon is sick. The reason people stop playing Blood Moon is because, oh, well, they can just play Dockside, and then they get out from under Blood Moon. You're still under a Blood Moon, dog. Like, you're under a Blood Moon, and if you have the Torpor Orb effect, Dockside doesn't even get you out. That's not a hard lock, but it slows down the pace of the game to the point where they're not feasibly recovering in a way that beats you consistently playing through it. I think that the distinction between hard locks and soft locks are who is allowed to play through them.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. I'm not gonna lie, a little bit ready to fight you on that one, but hearing your explanation, your understanding, and your definitions, I definitely do agree.
Yeah. Now that's just my opinion, though. To be fair, this is all just our opinions, based off experience and based off what we see, rather than what is and is not for a fact true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wait, no, I'm a woman. I'm always right. That's how that works.
Didn't say.
Okay, fine. We can cut it if we need to.
No, that's alright. We'll leave it. Who cares?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
So, hard locks, soft locks, yes.
Yeah.
Temporary stacks.
Temporary stacks. Temporary stacks, in my opinion, is the way to go for most cases. Yeah.
Love me some temporary stacks.
Yeah, temporary stacks is stuff like, okay, some modern examples. Charitable Levy just came out this set. High Noon just came out last set. Vexing Bauble just came out this set. These are stacks effects that have super relevant effects, but you have the ability to turn them off.
Urza. Any of the old Urza stacks.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. With the Winter Orb, the Static Orb that cares about being tapped and untapped. Trinisphere.
Yeah, just tap it and it's done.
Yeah, I think Urza's on 3-ball still, if I'm not mistaken. The people playing Urza, I should say. Yeah, I mean, I think temporary stacks is fantastic. I think the ability to just simply turn off your stacks whenever you need to or whenever you feel like it is like top notch. I feel like that's exactly where you want to be for most in most stacks decks.
Well, there's not only that, but also with cards like Boromir, with cards like Vexing Bauble, in some cases, if you turn off the stack space for whatever reason, say you have Boromir and Vexing Bauble on field, if you need an extra card, you can just get that. Or if your creatures are being targeted with a Blasphemous Act, I don't know who plays Blast Act in today's day and age, but you can just not.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing about temporary stacks to me is that it eats up time, and then on top of eating up time that your opponents are spending, it also gives you additional political favor.
Oh yeah.
Because you have the ability to turn it off. Like you can, if somebody's going to go for a win, and say, okay, I have Force of Will. Okay, I'll crack Vexing Bauble if you are going to Force of Will. Shake on it, and then boom, it's good. You got it. You counter the win con. High Noon is one of my favorite new cards that came out. I'm so angry that it's also red, so I can't play it in my deck.
It's okay. I'll live your dreams for you.
Yeah. High Noon is one of my favorites because it is a rule of law. A real rule of law, by the way, not like a fake one, like Deafening Silence, which is a good card. Or Aethersworn Canonist, which is a fake rule of law, because you can still kind of play through it if you have the right kind of build. High Noon is a hard, real rule of law. And just staple, it's at 2 mana, which is very much above rate. And then on top of that, it has not only a way to remove itself, but something else stapled to it.
Yeah, and it does 5 damage. Okay, most things in cEDH do 3 damage or 2 damage. I don't know who's playing Shock, but most things do 1, 2, or 3 damage.
Yeah.
So the ability to just absolutely annihilate like a Sisei. Yeah, the thing, a Kron.
The way that I would put it is that Bolt hits most things. 4 hit.
I knew.
Yeah.
Everything.
Bolt hits most things. 4 is the line that you need to be over, and 5 hits everything.
5 hit just. Also, I add Nas. Okay, I'm gonna go down to 6 life. I have, I don't know, a tapped mana vault. Okay, on your upkeep, sacrifice High Noon, 5 damage. Screw you, you're dead.
Yeah.
Congratulations. It's any target. You can kill players that way.
Yeah, congratulations. You were greedy. Sucks to suck, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
El Bozo.
It adds a whole new political element to your Stax gameplay where it's not that you are trying to stop your opponents, but you're slowing them down.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that segues pretty well into taxes. Tax effects are fantastic, I think. These are what your Thalia effects fall under. These are your Dauntless Dismantlers. I would call them tax effects personally, because you gain temporary advantage over your opponent's actions.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would describe a tax effect as.
Yeah. I think I'd agree.
Yeah.
So, we've talked all about these different pieces that you can turn on and off.
Yeah.
But, okay, why on God's green earth would I ever want to sacrifice my Boromir? Well, why would I ever want to turn off my Stax?
Well, there come points, and these are so common, it's not even funny, that you just don't have the capability to counterspell or to stop something that's going on. You have to realize that it is possible and common for you to use your opponent's hand as if it were your own. And the way that Stax decks do that is being willing to turn off their stacks so that your opponents can use their interaction.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 additional hands that you can play if you play it correctly. And that's why you want to turn off. That's why you want to be able to turn off your stacks when you can.
I think you are absolutely right. I think that... So, there's this thing in the Utah meta, in the Utah playstyle. I don't know if it's a thing in other places. I personally have mixed opinions on it. Where, if somebody says, alright, that guy has just laid down... I don't know... the Labman, right? Something simple. They've laid down Labman. All right. And somebody else says, well, I've got nothing for it. You'll look at them and you'll say, show me. And they'll show you their hand. You just get that information for free sometimes.
Yeah.
Hate that Utahns do it. For some reason we do. Don't use that against us, please, because we won't do it for people outside our playgroup.
Don't do that, by the way. Don't reveal your hand.
Don't give people information. I think I've done it once or twice, but that's in more casual games. In a tournament, if I ever catch any of you showing your hand in a tournament, I will actually find you and keel haul you.
Now, to be fair, there are reasonable scenarios for that where somebody is not going to interact unless you prove that you have what you say you have.
Okay, yeah.
And that's just because the trust has been broken. There used to be trust in cEDH, but it's been broken a lot recently. And now people are a lot more skeptical, as they should be, for what it's worth.
Absolutely.
So that is absolutely that is absolutely a thing you need to keep in mind. Just don't reveal your hand, dog. Don't do that.
Yeah. Countering things is really useful. So I don't know if you would call it a Stax piece, but I call it a game stopper. Lauren of the Third Path. She says that you and target opponent can draw a card. Now, Greenie, why is that a Stax piece? Well, if your library is empty because of Thassa's Oracle, that's just to say no to Thoracle wins. Yeah. Because if your library is empty and you draw a card, you'll lose the game. But
yeah. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's okay. I was just gonna say, it's happened once or twice where somebody has said, "Hey, I need to draw a card because we need to find an answer." And I'm playing mono blue, and I play a lot of counter spells. And I'll say, "Okay," and I'll let them draw the card. And I will use that ability. I will turn off that piece for somebody in that turn rotation. And it gets scary sometimes to play Thassa's Oracle to allow them to draw a card to see if we can stop the win now.
Yeah.
Because that's something a lot of cEDH players forget, is you can stop the win, the guaranteed win now, or the maybe win in the next seat. If you have a choice between the two, stop the guaranteed win now.
Yeah.
cEDH players, man.
Yeah, and you might get called on it for king making, but hey, you made the best decision with with the knowledge that you had. So who cares?
Well, it's also not technically king making, because if somebody lays down a Thassa's Oracle and somebody else says, "I might have Thassa's Oracle," well, that's not a guaranteed win.
Yeah, but that would require logic and
cEDH players.
cEDH players.
Like, when it comes from the Boros brain rot woman, it's bad.
Yeah. I would classify Lauren as interaction more than Stax. Because it doesn't play as Stax until it's needed to be a Stax effect. Because, granted, you cannot reasonably go for a Thoracle win with a Lauren on the board. You can't reasonably do it. But that's not what it does 95% of the time.
Yeah, 95% of the time it says remove target Grafdigger's Cage.
Yeah, remove a Grafdigger's Cage, maybe draw a card every now and then. Yeah.
You're super right. But I think that's a good discussion as to why we should turn off our Stax pieces. So, and we discussed this already. Do you think Stax pieces are better when they're less powerful, but temporary?
In my opinion, yeah. I'll play slightly weaker Stax effects if I have the ability to turn them off. Yeah. In a lot of cases too, like it's very much common that I'll take a much weaker card in the slot just for the ability to turn it off when I need to cut it off.
So I used to do HEMA, right? I used to do sword fighting. Fun little fact about me. And while I was learning a little bit about the history of sword fighting and the history of swords, we learned a little bit about fencing and versus a greatsword, right? That was the example they used. Fencing is very light, it is very small, it is very fast. It is not nearly as strong as a greatsword. But a greatsword is big and heavy, and once you start swinging a greatsword, oh lord, you better finish that swing. You cannot stop it. And in a fight between an experienced greatswordist and an experienced fencer, this is the example that was used. I don't know if it's actually true. Most of the time, the fencer will win because they're able to move quicker and they're able to get in and get out and get in and get out. They may be necessarily less powerful, but their ability to move and their ability to pivot as the match goes on gives so much more power in the long term.
Yeah. Yeah, that's completely reasonable of a thought process to me.
You have to be able to be flexible. If you're not flexible and you're super rigid, you're gonna break.
Yeah, flexibility is a big deal.
Oh yeah.
It's a big deal when playing Stax, and I don't want to claim that most Stax decks are poorly built, because that it's not the way that I mean it. It's they are built in a way that is inflexible a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's hurting Stax as an archetype a whole lot.
When people play every single blind obedience effect there is, it ends up hurting the deck because, yeah, you can have 1 or 2, but when you have 3 or 4, there comes a point where it's redundant. And you could be using those pieces. Yeah, it gives you, quote-unquote, more consistency. But if you're not able to flex your deck a little bit more, if you're not able to give your deck that consistency in dynamicism and in different aspects of play, as opposed to just every single game is everything enters tapped, you lose a lot of power. You really, really do.
Especially in a local meta that's repeating, because they learn that that's exactly what's going to happen, and they can tech towards it.
Yeah, you gotta keep people on their toes.
Yeah.
So, I think all of this has kind of led us to learn that overall, it's better to slow the game as opposed to stop the game.
Yeah, for sure. In my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like that, that really like that locks in on the topic of are taxes better than Staxes? And I think like it's completely reasonable, honestly, to think something like that.
I think it can be reasonable. Again, this is all with a giant asterisk next to it, depending on your local meta, depending on who you're playing with.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that death by 1,000 cuts is going to be more effective than beating somebody to death with 7 blood moons.
Right. Because again, winning is not the same as not losing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The point that we're trying to get across is that with temporary stacks, with lighter stacks, with soft stacks, with taxes, the goal is to make your opponents play fair while you don't have to. Because you can be better than other decks at playing fair.
Every Stax player loves to say, every mono white player, who am I kidding? Any player who plays white loves to say, I'm not staxing the game, I'm not being a menace, I'm making people play fair. And like, yeah, it's a joke, but there is also very much a true aspect to it. If you are playing against 3 people who are on equal footing and you have the upper ground, you're making them play fair. It doesn't mean you're playing fair.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like it's a super reasonable stance to take, and I honestly feel like it could be where Stax decks ought to be. It's like you are playing by definition a fair deck. Why are you playing a fair deck? I don't know. Probably because you find it more fun than playing Blue Farm for the 37,000th time.
No shame to Blue Farm players. We love you guys. Just got some originality.
Yeah.
So I think that moving on.
Why are you playing a more fair deck? Because you enjoy it, because you like it, and that doesn't make your choice of deck any less valid. It just means that you need to go about it in a slightly different way than most Stax players approach it.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, you can be better than other decks at playing fair. And if your deck is better at playing fair, then you should make your opponents play fair. Because let's keep it a buck, cEDH decks are not fair anymore.
No, they are not.
They are not fair anymore. You used to be able to pull up and have a completely reasonable game, and you used to be able to pull up and have a completely reasonable game. That is not the case anymore unless you're willing to make it so. And this is why I really don't want Stax to die out as an archetype, because man, playing fair is so much more fun than just breaking the game every game.
Don't worry, some of us are trying to keep it alive.
Yeah.
We few brave soldiers.
Soldiers.
But I mean, like, I don't think that Stax is going to die out anytime soon. I think that it's going to kind of turn into, I'm going to say like a small weird cult, but it's starting to look that way. Do you remember one of the rounds that I played in an online tournament recently? I was playing against 2 Tivits and an Atraxa.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, and I laid down a Sanctum Prelate on the number 2, and everybody just whined and moaned and pitched if it. I'd be able to counter this Atraxa if it weren't on 2. Well, you're playing Tivit. You're playing. Of course, I'm gonna lay it down.
Yeah, you're acting like you wouldn't have casted Time Sieve 5 turns ago.
I see it in your hand, guy. You flashed it 6 times, which is really impressive because we're playing webcam. But people are so silly.
Yeah.
People are so silly. Everyone hates Stax until the exact moment where it stops their opponents from winning. At which point they sidle up to you, they stick their 2 pointer fingers together, and they go, "Please, pretty Stax deck, please stay around because I love you so much." And it's like, stop with the ooh voice. I know you tried to win last turn. Listen to me.
Yeah.
So I think that Stax is not going to go away anytime soon. Not by a long shot. I think it might fall out of favor. Mostly because it's unpopular politically, but it's not going to fall out of favor because it sucks. Because, like we discussed before,
yeah,
suck.
I can agree with that, honestly.
So.
Yeah, I just think...
Stax, we love you.
Yeah.
Keep being weird.
I just think building stacks in a different fashion is the way to go than hard stacks. Because a lot of stacks players are like, they choose to play hard stacks.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the decks that people point to when they say, "Oh, Stax is bad. Stax can't win. Stax just sucks in general." I feel like that's what they point to, is the harder Stax decks, when in reality, that's not all Stax decks. And they absolutely could work, and work well even, if they were just constructed in a different fashion.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about how you would construct them. So we've talked a little bit about hard locks, and we've talked about temporary stacks. So I know you have a different name for it, and I'd like you to share that name, but I like to call my decks turbo stacks, where I will turbo out all of my stack spaces. I remember one game, very famously in a casual pod against 2 new cEDH players, and I feel bad about this one. Seat 1, turn 1, I laid down a Magus of the Moon, and then turn 2, I won the game.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have won the game if I didn't have my stack spaces. So I was able to build up a board, quote-unquote build up a board, and then I was able to swing and win turn 2. Yeah. So, what would you call that? Would you call that stacks? What would you call that?
My definition for that style of deck is a hybrid stacks deck.
Okay.
And the concept of a hybrid stacks deck to me has always been somewhat interesting. And I never see anybody talking about it, even though it's a thing that people kind of... and it's rare, don't get me wrong. But it's a thing that people do more often than zero. And it's always been so interesting to me. Because it's less about... it's a stacks deck at its core. But it's less about how you win and more about how you play. Where, like, hard stacks decks want to lock or stop everybody from else playing. Your hybrid decks actually use their stacks pieces to advance the board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some examples of that being, like, Noda, obviously. Jetmir, Urza, Bloodpod. Those Magda, maybe. I feel like...
Magda asterisk, if you build a stacks Magda. Because most Magdas these days are turbo, because we live in mid-range hell. But outside of the mid-range hell, if you build a weird Magda... I've seen a couple of you guys hanging around in the Magda server. The weird Magda players, the stacks Magda players, they absolutely play hybrid stacks.
Yeah. You guys are my kings, for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
I stand you, Stax Magda players.
We love you.
Yeah.
I also fear you.
Yeah. I think, like, genuinely, the concept of a hybrid Stax deck could have some real weight to it if it was, like, worked on genuinely, like, because a lot of Stax decks, a lot of hybrid decks, as they are just, okay, this is a Stax deck, but it does this also. There's no community for a hybrid stacks deck. And I feel like if there was one put together, it could go a long way towards getting that sub archetype out there and really letting those decks shine and bringing Stax back to this meta. I think
Stax definitely needs a little bit of a reface. It needs to be updated. It needs to be younger. And I think the way to do that is absolutely by hybridizing it, making it a little faster, and not making it a yes and deck, but making it a, okay, Stax and yes because.
Yeah,
so
yes because. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah. So I don't think I need to explain the concept. I will anyway. Yes and being something like, I don't know, mono white Heliod. Yes, I play Stax, and I also have an infinite combo that has nothing to do with my Stax pieces.
Yeah.
A yes because deck would be Winota, Jetmir, Urza specifically. I love the idea of an Urza deck being a yes because. Yes, I'm laying down my Stax pieces because they give me more mana.
Yeah, Urza to me is one of the poster children of a hybrid deck to me, because the concept of it is it's all there. It's like, okay, you play your Stax pieces. They not only make you more mana, but by making you more mana, you get to turn them off for you only. And that's called breaking parity, for those of you who don't know. But that is the definition of a hybrid Stax deck. And I feel like that is the way to go for modern, I think is the correct way to put it, modern Stax decks. Because there hasn't been an old school Stax deck that really come up and wreck stuff in a minute.
I think now I'm genuinely trying to think, are there any quote-unquote old school Stax decks that have popped up and been like, this is great? Because there was Comedian a couple weeks ago, at this point it'd be like a month or two ago, he tweeted that Winota is dead. Urza hasn't really done a ton in terms of gold and above tournaments, at least on top deck. It's hard. It's really hard to have an older style Stax deck. I know that Oswald, which sometimes plays a couple of Stax, has been beginning to do stuff.
There has been a small Oswald community for sure. One of our community members is actually a big proprietor of Oswald decks.
Super good deck too, by the way. But
I wouldn't say super good, but it's reasonable. It's way more reasonable than people give it credit for.
So yeah, I don't think that there are any old-timey, old-school Stax decks that have been performing, which makes sense. I mean, Tiamat isn't necessarily going to perform super well in the year of our Lord, 2024.
Ain't it, though?
Wish it would.
Rest in spaghetti. My queen.
Rest in pieces. So, yeah. Do you think there is anything better than hybrid at the moment? Of course, we're going to, 10 years down the line, this is going to age like milk, right? But do you think there's anything better in this moment, in this meta, than hybrid Stax, for Stax specifically?
Honestly, not really. I feel like hybrid Stax is the way to go, but at the same time, that's kind of a loaded statement, because hybrid Stax is like an all-encompassing thing, where it's like, okay, you have turbo Stax, you have aggro Stax, you have mid-range Stax, you have, this, that, and the other. It's kind of all-encompassing for Stax decks that aren't hard Stax decks.
Well, yeah, it's definitely an archetype, but do you think that it could be, and we mentioned this earlier, not only I wouldn't say a new archetype, but a reface to an old archetype, and do you think that this could help with the problem of blue farm and mid-range health?
I think so, honestly. I think that a lot of the pieces are there. We still need some solid preventative card draw hate, for what it's worth. We need some solid preventative card draw hate, because punishing card draw hate freaking sucks. Orcish Bowmasters is not an answer to card draw hate. It exacerbates the problem.
Not Winota. Bowmasters should have been printed with target permanent that player controls, that the player who drew the cards controls. It should not be anything. Because what that means is, hey, I'm Winota. I have a bunch of board full of 1/1s. My board is now empty. Thanks, wheel.
Yeah.
It just sucks.
Yeah.
It should be. Bowmasters was a mistake.
Bowmasters was a mistake. Yeah, we need some preventative card draw hate. I think Free Leovold, my goat.
That's spicy. You and I are gonna discuss that one off screen, because if we discuss that on screen or on podcast on air, you might get a little bit. We might get a little heated on that.
Oh yeah,
one.
that's gonna be a fun one for sure.
Oh lord.
Yeah, Free Leovold, my goat. Bring back the Bandits Commanders list and put Timna on it.
Interesting.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, do you have anything else to bring up?
No. If you really like this episode, drop a like, subscribe if you feel like listening to more two people just, talk a little bit about Stax and other cEDH concepts. Drop a comment down below. Tell us what you think of Stax. Tell us your best opinions on Stax and your worst opinion on Stax. And tell me why I'm wrong that Noda is the best deck in the meta. Anything else?
Hey, you got me.
All right.
My name is Nill.
I'm Greenie.
And this has been Tough Mulligans. We'll see you guys next time.